Woman with a stern expression, approaching her. The woman stopped abruptly when she saw Eleanor in the first-class cabin, her eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right seat?" the attendant asked loudly, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Eleanor felt a flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. She maintained her composure and replied, "Yes, I'm quite sure. Here's my ticket." The attendant examined the ticket as though it were counterfeit. Her demeanor grew colder. "Well, this is unusual," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for Eleanor to hear. "Is there a problem?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady but tinged with unease. The attendant didn't respond directly. Instead, she turned to her colleague and whispered something. The younger attendant from the gate came over, and the two exchanged glances. Moments later, the middle-aged woman turned back to Eleanor. "I'm sorry, but there's been a mistake. This seat isn't available." Eleanor frowned. "I don't understand. My ticket clearly says 1A. "We're going to have to ask you to move to coach," the attendant said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. A murmur spread through the cabin. Passengers began to whisper, their curious eyes darting between Eleanor and the attendants. Eleanor felt a surge of indignation. "I paid for this seat," she said firmly. "Why should I move?" The attendant's expression hardened. "We're asking you to cooperate, ma'am. It's a simple request." At that moment, a younger passenger seated nearby, a well-dressed man in his 30s, intervened. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice sharp. "She has a first-class ticket. Why are you asking her to move?" The attendant shot him a warning look but didn't answer. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she stood her ground. "I'm not moving," she said quietly but resolutely. The tension in the cabin was palpable. The attendants, clearly uncomfortable with the growing attention, stepped away briefly to confer. Eleanor overheard snippets of their conversation. Phrases like "policy issue" and "overbooking" floated in the air, but none of it made sense. When the attendants returned, the younger one addressed Eleanor again. "Ma'am, we're asking for your cooperation. If you don't move, we'll have to involve security." The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. She glanced around the cabin, meeting the sympathetic gazes of some passengers and the indifferent stares of others. Realizing she had little choice, Eleanor rose slowly from her seat. She didn't say a word as she gathered her belongings and made her way toward the coach section. The walk down the aisle felt like an eternity, each step heavier than the last. As she settled into her new seat, a cramped and uncomfortable spot near the back of the plane, tears pricked the corners of her eyes. But Eleanor refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. What the flight attendants didn't know was that Eleanor wasn't just any elderly woman. She was a fighter. She had faced discrimination before, on buses, in schools, even in the workplace. Each time, she had risen above it, proving her worth not through anger but through action. This time would be no different. Unknown to the crew, several passengers had recorded the incident on their phones. By the time the plane landed, the footage was already circulating online. Within hours, it went viral. The hashtags #FirstClassJustice and #FlyingWhileBlack began trending on social media. Eleanor's son called her as soon as she reached her destination. "Mom, what happened?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and outrage. Eleanor recounted the incident calmly, though the pain was still fresh. Her son was livid. "We're not letting this slide," he said. "This is bigger than just you. This is about respect, dignity, and basic human decency." Eleanor agreed, but she wasn't sure what could be done. After all, she was just one person. Little did she know, the story was already taking on a life of its own. Prominent figures began to speak out, demanding accountability from the airline. Activists and community leaders rallied to her side. The airline, caught off guard by the public outcry, issued a bland apology, claiming the incident was a misunderstanding. But Eleanor wasn't interested in apologies. She wanted change. And as she would soon realize, she had the power to make it happen. The sun was setting on the small town of Port Haven as Eleanor Wright sat by the window in her son's home, sipping tea and gazing at the horizon. Her day, which had started with such excitement and promise, had unraveled into a humiliating ordeal she couldn't shake from her mind. The warmth of her granddaughter's embrace and the pride of watching her walk across the graduation stage had momentarily dulled the sting, but now, in the quiet of the evening, the incident played on a loop in her head. Her son, Martin, entered the room holding his laptop, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "Mom, have you seen this?" he asked, setting the device down on the coffee table. The screen displayed a video, shaky but clear, of the confrontation on the plane. The voices of the flight attendants were unmistakable, and the camera caught every word of Eleanor's quiet yet firm resistance. "It's everywhere," Martin said, scrolling through a flood of comments. "Thousands of people are sharing it, Mom. This isn't just a story anymore, it's a movement." Eleanor leaned closer, her brow furrowed as she read the comments. Messages of support poured in from people across the country. Some expressed outrage, others offered apologies on behalf of the airline, and many shared their own experiences of discrimination. "This is overwhelming," Eleanor murmured. "I never wanted all this attention." "But you deserve it," Martin said firmly. "This isn't just about you. This is about standing up to the kind of treatment people think they can get away with." As the days passed, the video continued to gain traction. News outlets picked up the story, and Eleanor found herself fielding calls from reporters, activists, and even lawyers offering to take her case pro bono. At first, she hesitated. She had never been one to seek the spotlight, preferring to make her mark through quiet acts of kindness and service. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this was bigger than her. The incident on the plane was just one example of the countless indignities faced by people of color, women, and the elderly every day. If she stayed silent, she would be complicit in allowing those injustices to continue. With her son's encouragement, Eleanor agreed to meet with a civil rights attorney named Angela Moreno. Angela was young, passionate, and sharp as a tack. She arrived at Eleanor's home with a stack of documents and a plan of action. "Mrs. Wright," Angela began, "your story has struck a chord with so many people because it's something they've either experienced themselves or feared experiencing. This isn't just a legal case, it's an opportunity to push for systemic change." "What kind of change?" Eleanor asked, her skepticism evident. "For starters, we can demand a formal apology from the airline," Angela said. "But beyond that, we can push for policy reforms, mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all airline employees, better protocols for handling customer disputes, and even changes to seating policies to ensure incidents like this don't happen again." Eleanor listened intently, her mind racing. "And what happens if they refuse?" Angela smiled. "Then we take it to court. But I have a feeling they'll want to avoid that kind of publicity." Eleanor agreed to move forward, and Angela wasted no time. She filed a formal complaint with the airline and released a statement to the press, emphasizing that this wasn't just about one person's experience but about the broader issue of discrimination in the travel industry. The airline's initial response was dismissive, labeling the incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding and insisting that Eleanor had been treated with the utmost respect. But the public wasn't buying it. Protesters began organizing outside the airline's headquarters, holding signs that read, "First-class justice," and "Flying while black is not a crime." Eleanor watched the coverage on television, her emotions a mix of gratitude and unease. She appreciated the support but worried about how far things might go. She didn't want violence or chaos, she wanted solutions. One evening, as she sat with her family, an unexpected visitor arrived. A man in his 60s, dressed in a crisp suit, introduced himself as Richard Calloway, a retired airline executive. "I saw your story, Mrs. Wright," he said, taking a seat across from her. "And I have to say, I'm both appalled and inspired. Appalled by how you were treated, and inspired by how you've handled it with such grace." "Thank you," Eleanor said cautiously. "But why are you here?" Richard leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "Because I think you have the power to do more than just change policies. I think you can change the game entirely." Eleanor frowned. "What do you mean? What if you didn't just demand changes from the airline?" Richard asked. "What if you took ownership of the issue, literally?" Eleanor stared at him, uncomprehending. "You're suggesting I buy the airline?" Richard nodded. "It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Airlines are struggling right now, and their stock prices reflect that. With the right investors and a solid plan, you could acquire a controlling interest." Eleanor stared at him, uncomprehending. "You're suggesting I buy the airline?" Richard nodded. "It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Airlines are struggling right now, and their stock prices reflect that. With the right investors and a solid plan, you could acquire a controlling interest and set the tone for the entire industry." The room fell silent. Martin was the first to speak. "That's a bold idea," he said. "But where would we even start?" "I can help with that," Richard said. "I still have connections in the industry. And with the momentum your story has generated, I think you'd find plenty of people willing to back you financially." Eleanor shook her head, laughing softly. "I'm just a retired schoolteacher. What do I know about running an airline?" "You know what it's like to be a passenger," Richard replied. "And that's more than most executives can say. Besides, you wouldn't have to do it alone. You'd have a team to handle the logistics. Your role would be to set the vision and ensure it aligns with the values you've fought for your whole life." Eleanor didn't sleep much that night. The idea of buying an airline was so absurd it was almost laughable. But as the hours passed, she found herself considering it more seriously. What if she could turn her pain into progress? What if she could ensure that no one else ever had to endure what she had? By morning, she had made up her mind. "Let's explore it," she told her son and Richard. "I'm not making any promises, but I'm willing to see where this leads." Over the next few weeks, Eleanor immersed herself in learning about the airline industry. Richard introduced her to investors, many of whom were eager to support her mission. Community leaders and activists organized fundraisers to help raise the capital needed for the acquisition. The media followed her journey closely, dubbing her the unlikely aviator. Eleanor remained grounded throughout it all, reminding herself that this wasn't about ego or revenge. It was about making a difference. And as she took each step forward, she realized that her ordinary life was becoming something extraordinary. She wasn't just standing up for herself anymore, she was standing up for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The days following Eleanor's decision to explore the idea of acquiring the airline were a whirlwind of meetings, research, and soul-searching. Despite her initial reservations, she found herself intrigued by the possibility of not just challenging the status quo but redefining it. With every step, her resolve grew stronger. She wasn't just doing this for herself, she was doing it for every person who had ever been made to feel small, unworthy, or invisible. Eleanor's son, Martin, became her unofficial chief of staff, organizing her schedule and connecting her with the people she needed to meet. Richard Calloway, the retired airline executive who had first suggested the idea, was now a permanent fixture at their dining room table, explaining the intricacies of the airline business. He spoke of everything from fuel costs and crew management to the labyrinthine world of government regulations. Eleanor soaked it all in, her sharp mind cutting through the complexities with surprising ease. Still, doubts lingered. One evening, after hours of poring over spreadsheets and business proposals, Eleanor leaned back in her chair and sighed. Richard, be honest with me. Do you really think this is possible? I mean, who's going to take me seriously? A retired schoolteacher trying to buy an airline? Richard looked at her, his expression unwavering. Eleanor, you've already done the impossible. You've turned a moment of humiliation into a movement. People aren't just supporting you because they feel sorry for you. They're supporting you because they believe in you. And so do I. Buoyed by Richard's confidence, Eleanor pressed on. The next step was finding investors who could help her secure the capital needed for the acquisition. Word of her endeavor had spread far and wide, and offers of support poured in from unexpected places. A prominent tech entrepreneur reached out, expressing his admiration for her courage and pledging a significant sum to her cause. A coalition of civil rights organizations also stepped in, seeing Eleanor's fight as an extension of their own battles for equality and justice. But not everyone was supportive. The airline's leadership, already reeling from the public backlash, was quick to dismiss Eleanor's efforts as a publicity stunt. In a thinly veiled jab during a press conference, the CEO of the airline scoffed, "Running an airline isn't a game for amateurs. It requires expertise, experience, and a deep understanding of the industry. This is nothing more than a distraction." Eleanor watched the clip on television, her jaw tightening. "A distraction," she said aloud. "We'll see about that." The criticism only fueled her determination. With Angela Moreno, her fiery civil rights attorney, leading the charge, Eleanor began assembling a team of advisors and consultants. They included economists, aviation experts, and even former airline employees who had experienced the same kind of systemic discrimination Eleanor was fighting against. Together, they crafted a vision for what her airline could become, a company that prioritized diversity, fairness, and exceptional customer service. As the weeks went by, Eleanor's vision began to take shape. Her airline wouldn't just be a business, it would be a symbol of change. She imagined a fleet of planes with names like Unity and Equality, each one bearing a message of hope and inclusivity. She envisioned training programs designed to elevate underrepresented voices within the industry and policies that would ensure no passenger was ever made to feel less than. Despite the growing support, the path forward was far from smooth. Securing the necessary funding proved to be a monumental challenge. While many were eager to back Eleanor's vision, others were hesitant, fearing that her lack of experience would lead to failure. Some investors outright refused to meet with her, citing her age, race, and gender as reasons to doubt her ability to succeed. Eleanor faced these rejections with the same quiet dignity that had carried her through the would be challenging. There were policies to rewrite, teams to rebuild, and a culture to transform. But she was ready. With her son, Martin, by her side and a dedicated team behind her, she was determined to create an airline that lived up to its new name, Elevation Air. In a statement to the press, Eleanor said, "This isn't just about me. It's about all of us. It's about proving that dignity, respect, and equality are not just ideals, they're necessities. And it's about showing the world that no matter who you are or where you come from, you can rise above." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring millions to believe in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And as the world watched Eleanor take flight, one thing was clear: her journey was far from over. Eleanor's new role as the majority owner of Elevation Air was met with a mixture of celebration, curiosity, and skepticism. For her supporters, it was a monumental victory, a living testament to the power of resilience and determination. But for Eleanor, it was only the beginning of a daunting journey. Transforming a struggling airline marred by scandal into a thriving symbol of equality and excellence would be her greatest challenge yet. The day after the acquisition was finalized, Eleanor walked into the airline's headquarters for the first time. The imposing glass building, once a symbol of exclusion and corporate indifference, now felt like a blank canvas. Employees, some curious and others apprehensive, watched as she made her way through the hallways. Her quiet demeanor belied the gravity of her intentions. She wasn't just here to own the airline, she was here to change it. One of her first orders of business was to address the staff. Standing in the main auditorium, Eleanor looked out at a sea of faces: pilots, flight attendants, engineers, and administrative personnel, all uncertain about what the future held. She began her speech with a story, not about her recent triumph but about her early days as a schoolteacher. "When I first started teaching," she said, her voice steady but warm, "I had a classroom full of students who had been written off by society. They were told they wouldn't succeed, that they didn't matter. But I didn't see them that way. I saw potential. I saw promise. And I see the same thing here." Her words hung in the air, drawing everyone in. "This airline has faced its share of challenges, and we have a long way to go. But I believe in the people who make it run. I believe in your ability to create something extraordinary. Together, we're going to build an airline that isn't just about getting people from one place to another. It's going to be about how we treat each other along the way." The room erupted into applause, and for the first time, Eleanor felt a sense of hope that perhaps, despite the odds, they could turn things around. But not everyone was on board. Within the upper echelons of the company, there were whispers of doubt. Some executives bristled at the idea of taking orders from someone they viewed as an outsider. They questioned her qualifications, her vision, and even her intentions. Eleanor was well aware of this undercurrent of resistance, but she didn't let it deter her. Instead, she leaned on her growing network of allies, including Sylvia Hughes, who became both a mentor and a sounding board. One of Eleanor's first major initiatives was to implement a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program. She enlisted experts to conduct training sessions, revamped the hiring process to ensure fairness, and created new opportunities for underrepresented groups within the industry. These changes were met with both praise and pushback. Some employees embraced the new direction, while others grumbled about political correctness and unnecessary changes. Eleanor addressed these concerns head-on during a company-wide meeting. "Change is never easy," she said. "But it's necessary. We can't move forward by clinging to the past. We have to be willing to grow, to adapt, and to do better, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes us stronger." While implementing internal reforms, Eleanor also turned her attention to the airline's customer experience. She believed that if they wanted to rebuild trust, they needed to start with the people who mattered most, the passengers. She introduced new policies to ensure equitable treatment for all customers, regardless of their background. These included mandatory sensitivity training for all customer-facing staff, stricter guidelines for handling complaints, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. To signal the airline's new direction, Eleanor spearheaded a rebranding campaign. The name Elevation Air was unveiled alongside a sleek new logo featuring a soaring bird, a symbol of freedom, resilience, and the boundless possibilities of flight. The company's slogan, "Rise Above," encapsulated Eleanor's vision not just for the airline but for society as a whole. The rebranding effort extended to the planes themselves. Each aircraft was given a name reflecting values like unity, equality, and progress. The interiors were redesigned to prioritize comfort and accessibility, with thoughtful touches that made every passenger feel valued. Eleanor even collaborated with local artists to create unique, uplifting murals in the terminals, transforming the once sterile spaces into vibrant hubs of inspiration. As the changes began to take effect, Eleanor faced her fair share of challenges. Financially, the airline was still on shaky ground. Balancing the costs of the rebranding campaign, staff training, and one of Eleanor's first major initiatives was to implement a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program. She enlisted experts to conduct training sessions, revamped the hiring process to ensure fairness, and created new opportunities for underrepresented groups within the industry. These changes were met with both praise and pushback. Some employees embraced the new direction, while others grumbled about political correctness and unnecessary changes. Eleanor addressed these concerns head-on during a company-wide meeting. "Change is never easy," she said. "But it's necessary. We can't move forward by clinging to the past. We have to be willing to grow, to adapt, and to do better, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes us stronger." While implementing internal reforms, Eleanor also turned her attention to the airline's customer experience. She believed that if they wanted to rebuild trust, they needed to start with the people who mattered most, the passengers. She introduced new policies to ensure equitable treatment for all customers, regardless of their background. These included mandatory sensitivity training for all customer-facing staff, stricter guidelines for handling complaints, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. To signal the airline's new direction, Eleanor spearheaded a rebranding campaign. The name Elevation Air was unveiled alongside a sleek new logo featuring a soaring bird, a symbol of freedom, resilience, and the boundless possibilities of flight. The company's slogan, "Rise Above," encapsulated Eleanor's vision not just for the airline but for society as a whole. The rebranding effort extended to the planes themselves. Each aircraft was given a name reflecting values like unity, equality, and progress. The interiors were redesigned to prioritize comfort and accessibility, with thoughtful touches that made every passenger feel valued. Eleanor even collaborated with local artists to create unique, uplifting murals in the terminals, transforming the once sterile spaces into vibrant hubs of inspiration. As the changes began to take effect, Eleanor faced her fair share of challenges. Financially, the airline was still on shaky ground. Balancing the costs of the rebranding campaign, staff training, and as Elevation Air continued its transformation under Eleanor's leadership, the stakes grew higher. The initial momentum of the rebranding campaign and internal reforms was undeniable, but sustaining that energy required more than just good intentions. Eleanor faced the harsh realities of the airline industry, fierce competition, razor-thin profit margins, and the constant pressure to innovate. Eleanor began each day early, poring over reports and holding strategy meetings with her core team. Her office, once a sterile corporate space, now featured personal touches, a photograph of her grandchildren, a framed quote from Maya Angelou, and a small plaque that read, "Rise Above." These reminders of her purpose kept her grounded, even as the weight of her responsibilities threatened to overwhelm her. One of the most pressing challenges was addressing the lingering skepticism among certain employees and passengers. While many had embraced the airline's new direction, others remained wary. Complaints trickled in from longtime staff members who felt their voices weren't being heard amid the sweeping changes. Passengers accustomed to the old ways of the airline sometimes expressed frustration with the new policies, particularly those aimed at promoting inclusivity and equity. Eleanor decided to tackle these issues head-on, organizing a series of town hall meetings with employees and passengers. These gatherings took place in airport lounges, maintenance hangars, and even in-flight conferences during long-haul routes. Eleanor wanted to hear directly from the people who made the airline run and those who trusted it to take them to their destinations. The first town hall was tense. A senior pilot stood up and voiced what many others were thinking. "With all due respect, Mrs. Simmons," he began, "I've been flying for this airline for over 20 years. I understand the need for change, but some of us feel like we're being left behind in the process. What about the traditions and values that made this company what it is?" Eleanor took a deep breath before responding. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, her tone measured but resolute. "Tradition is important, and I respect the history of this airline. But we have to ask ourselves, what kind of traditions are we upholding? Are they ones that elevate us or ones that hold us back? My goal isn't to erase the past but to build a future where everyone feels they belong. And that starts with listening, which is why I'm here." Her response didn't solve every problem, but it opened the door for dialogue. Over the course of the town halls, Eleanor heard countless stories, some inspiring, others heartbreaking. A flight attendant shared her experience of being overlooked for promotions because of her accent. A passenger recounted how a simple act of kindness from a crew member had restored his faith in humanity during a difficult time. These stories became the foundation for new initiatives aimed at fostering a culture of empathy and understanding. One of the most transformative changes came when Eleanor launched the Voices of Elevation program, a platform that encouraged employees and passengers to share their ideas, concerns, and experiences. Submissions ranged from practical suggestions for improving efficiency to deeply personal accounts of overcoming adversity. Eleanor personally reviewed many of these entries, often responding with handwritten notes or invitations to discuss ideas further. The program quickly gained traction, leading to tangible improvements across the airline. A baggage handler's suggestion to streamline the luggage tagging system reduced delays and increased customer satisfaction. A group of flight attendants proposed a mentorship program for new hires, fostering a sense of community and support. Even passengers got involved, with one frequent flyer suggesting a loyalty program that rewarded acts of kindness during flights. Despite these successes, Eleanor knew that the airline's survival depended on more than just goodwill. Financial stability remained a critical concern. Revenue had increased since the rebranding, but rising fuel costs and market competition posed ongoing threats. Eleanor worked tirelessly with her financial advisors, exploring innovative ways to boost profitability without compromising the airline's core values. One of the most ambitious projects was the introduction of a premium travel experience called Elevation First. This service offered unparalleled luxury, from private suites with panoramic windows to gourmet dining curated by renowned chefs. But what set Elevation First apart wasn't just the opulence, it was the emphasis on inclusivity. Unlike other first-class services, which often catered to an elite few, Elevation First was designed to make luxury travel more accessible. Special promotions and flexible payment options allowed a wider range of passengers to experience the service, breaking down barriers that had long defined the industry. The launch of Elevation First was a resounding success, drawing praise from customers and critics alike. Travel bloggers raved about the innovative approach, and industry analysts began to take notice. Elevation Air is rewriting the rules of luxury travel, one headline proclaimed. For Eleanor, the accolades were gratifying, but her true measure of success came from the stories she heard from passengers. A single mother who had saved up for months to take her children on their first vacation sent Eleanor a heartfelt letter, describing how the experience had brought her family closer together. While Elevation Air's reputation soared, Eleanor continued to face challenges on a personal level. Balancing her professional responsibilities with her personal life was no easy feat. Her grandchildren often called to ask when she would visit, and her best friend, Millie, frequently reminded her to take time for herself. Eleanor cherished these relationships, finding solace in their unwavering support. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Eleanor received a call from Sylvia Hughes. "You're doing incredible work, Eleanor," Sylvia said. "But don't forget why you started this journey. It wasn't just about running an airline. It was about proving that dignity and equality matter. Don't lose sight of that." Sylvia's words resonated deeply with Eleanor. She realized that in her pursuit of progress, she had sometimes overlooked the importance of celebrating how far they had come. Inspired, she organized a company-wide event to commemorate the anniversary of Elevation Air's transformation. The celebration, held in a massive airport hangar, featured performances, speeches, and a video montage highlighting the airline's journey. The highlight of the evening came when Eleanor took the stage. She spoke not about her achievements but about the people who had made them possible, the employees who had embraced change, the passengers who had placed their trust in the airline, and the community that had rallied behind her. "This isn't just my story," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It's our story. Together, we've shown that when we rise above, we can achieve extraordinary things." As the event drew to a close, Eleanor looked out at the crowd. The faces she saw weren't just those of colleagues or customers, they were a reflection of the values she had fought so hard to uphold. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that their journey was far from over but that they were on the right path. Eleanor returned home that night, exhausted but content. Sitting by the fireplace with a cup of tea, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges, but she felt ready to face them. After all, she had built more than an airline, she had built a legacy. The one-year anniversary of Elevation Air's transformation had come and gone, leaving an indelible mark not only on the airline but also on Eleanor herself. The momentum of change was evident everywhere, from the employees who now walked with a renewed sense of purpose to the passengers who shared their gratitude for an experience that felt welcoming and dignified. However, Eleanor knew that the journey was far from over. As she often reminded her team, change isn't a destination, it's a journey. Eleanor's leadership continued to evolve, shaped by the challenges and triumphs she encountered. She had gained widespread recognition as a trailblazer in the industry, with magazines and news outlets clamoring to feature her story. But for Eleanor, the accolades were secondary. Her focus remained on the people who had supported her vision and the lives that were being transformed by her efforts. One of Eleanor's most ambitious projects during this period was the establishment of the Elevation Foundation, a nonprofit initiative aimed at creating opportunities for underserved communities. The foundation provided scholarships for aspiring pilots and aviation professionals from diverse backgrounds, mentoring programs for young women interested in STEM fields, and funding for community projects in areas where Elevation Air operated. The foundation's inaugural event was held in Atlanta, a city that had always been close to Eleanor's heart. Hundreds of attendees gathered in a grand hall adorned with images of the skies, symbolizing the limitless potential of the human spirit. Eleanor took the stage to deliver a keynote speech that would later go viral. "When I bought this airline, people asked me why," she began, her voice steady but passionate. They couldn't understand why a retired schoolteacher would take on such a monumental task. The truth is, I didn't buy an airline. I bought a chance to rewrite a story that's been told the same way for far too long. And now, with the Elevation Foundation, we're going to help others rewrite their stories, too. The applause was thunderous, and Eleanor could see tears in the eyes of many attendees. Among them was a young woman named Jasmine, who had recently received a scholarship from the foundation. After the event, Jasmine approached Eleanor with a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Mrs. Simmons," she said, her voice trembling, "I just wanted to thank you. Because of you, I'm starting flight school next month. I never thought someone like me could have this opportunity." Eleanor smiled warmly, placing a hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "Just promise me one thing, when you're up there in the sky, remember that you belong there. And when you've made it, reach back and help someone else get there, too." Stories like Jasmine's were the fuel that kept Eleanor going. Yet, as the foundation flourished, new challenges emerged. Competitors in the airline industry, threatened by Elevation Air's growing success, began to fight back. Rival companies launched aggressive marketing campaigns, attempting to lure passengers away with flashy promotions and steep discounts. Industry insiders criticized Eleanor's inclusive policies, claiming they were unsustainable in a cutthroat market. Eleanor refused to be rattled. Instead, she doubled down on what made Elevation Air unique. She worked with her team to develop a campaign called "Flying with Purpose," which highlighted real stories from passengers and employees. The campaign featured heartfelt videos of a grandfather reuniting with his family, a young woman flying to her dream job interview, and a maintenance worker whose innovative idea had improved flight safety. Each story ended with the tagline, "At Elevation Air, you're more than a passenger, you're part of the journey." The campaign was a resounding success, resonating deeply with audiences. Social media buzzed with praise, and bookings surged. But more importantly, it reaffirmed Eleanor's belief that people were hungry for authenticity and connection. The airline wasn't just competing on price or amenities, it was competing on values. Amidst the whirlwind of her professional life, Eleanor faced a deeply personal challenge that would test her resilience. One evening, she received a call from her doctor with news that shook her to her core. She had been diagnosed with a treatable but serious heart condition. The prognosis was optimistic, but it required immediate attention and a period of rest. For the first time since taking over the airline, Eleanor was forced to step back. She appointed her trusted COO, Carlos Mendoza, as interim CEO and began focusing on her health. The transition was difficult for someone as driven as Eleanor, but she knew it was necessary. Her family rallied around her, with her grandchildren frequently visiting to keep her spirits high. During this period of recovery, Eleanor found herself reflecting deeply on her journey. She revisited the journal she had kept since the day she decided to buy the airline, reading through entries that chronicled her doubts, victories, and lessons learned. One entry stood out: leadership isn't about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. If I can do that, everything else will fall into place. As weeks turned into months, Eleanor's health improved, and she began to re-engage with Elevation Air. But this time, she approached her role with a new perspective. She delegated more responsibilities, trusting her team to carry forward the vision she had set in motion. She also made a point to prioritize balance, setting an example for others that success didn't have to come at the expense of well-being. When Eleanor returned to the office, she was greeted with a surprise that left her speechless. The employees of Elevation Air had organized a celebration to welcome her back, complete with a video montage of heartfelt messages from staff and passengers alike. One message, in particular, brought tears to her eyes: "Mrs. Simmons, because of you, I believe in second chances. Thank you for giving us all a reason to rise above." Eleanor took the stage, her voice filled with gratitude. "I may have started this journey," she said, "but each of you has carried it forward. This airline isn't just mine, it's ours. And together, we'll continue to soar." In the months that followed, Eleanor focused on securing the airline's legacy. She worked with her legal team to establish a trust that would ensure Elevation Air remained committed to its values, even after her tenure. She also continued to expand the Elevation Foundation, partnering with organizations around the world to amplify its impact. As she approached her 70th birthday, Eleanor began to consider what her next chapter might look like. She had achieved more than she ever dreamed possible, but she felt there was still work to be done. Whether it was mentoring the next generation of leaders, advocating for systemic change, or simply spending more time with her family, Eleanor knew that her purpose would continue to guide her. The story of Eleanor Simmons and Elevation Air became a symbol of resilience, courage, and the power of belief. It was a story told not just in boardrooms or news articles but in the hearts of those who had been touched by her vision. And as the airline continued to climb to new heights, it carried with it the legacy of a woman who refused to let others define her destiny. For Eleanor, the skies were no longer the limit, they were just the beginning.